Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Minnesota State Park Hiking Club Trail series. Today, we traveled to Flandrau State Park in New Ulm, Minnesota. Originally purchased by the state in 1935 and named Cottonwood River State Park, it has a similar history to Whitewater State Park over on the eastern side of the state. It housed a CCC presence, and then in World War II was the site of a German prisoner of war camp. Interestingly, the camps built by the WPA and CCC were designed to have a German aesthetic, since New Ulm was overwhelmingly ethnically German. This must have been an unexpected surprise for German prisoners of war held here during the time. The park was renamed in 1945 after a prominent figure in the founding of Minnesota, Charles E. Flandrau, a lawyer who helped draft the Minnesota Constitution, served on the Minnesota Supreme Court, and also served as a captain of the Union Army to defend the community of New Ulm. The river flowing through Flandrau State Park is its former namesake, the Cottonwood River. In a rather unusual situation, there are no bridges that cross the Cottonwood River within the park, so despite a sizable amount of the park being on the south side of the river, there's no way to access it. The valley floor of Flandrau State Park is mostly secondary forest, as it was cleared for agriculture and then, from the 1930s on, for several decades, was underwater as a reservoir from the dam that was eventually removed in 1995 after being repeatedly damaged over the decades. The trees that dot the park are varied and include many trees such as the sugar maple, basswood, common hackberry, eastern cottonwood, silver maple, American elm, and green ash, as well as several others. The wildlife throughout the park includes your white-tailed deer, coyotes, gray foxes, raccoons, beavers, skunks, opossum, and minks. There are also 100 species of birds that have been recorded within the park, and the river supports several varieties of fish, such as the northern pike and smallmouth bass. The hiking club starts from a parking lot not far from the campground. This is a state park that would be a good one to camp at, as it's in between Fort Ridgely State Park and Minneopa State Park. This would allow you a central place to stay while visiting all three parks, and the Flandrau Trail starts within walking distance from the State Park Hiking Club Trail. The initial portion of the trail takes you up on a ridge that looks slightly over the road as you walk. Eventually, the trail turns and you head inward into a forest that borders a prairie. The trail has a sporadic canopy, and this area can often get quite wet, so I'd recommend sunscreen and bug spray for this hike, as you will likely need both. The prairie to your left fades from view for the most part, but you can periodically see it through the increasingly thick underbrush. Eventually, the trail heads back up a little and brings you out onto the open field, but provides a decent view of it from a nice bench, which, if the weather isn't too hot, provides a nice area to sit and rest a while before continuing onward. The trail continues into the edge of the forest again as you slowly descend from the elevated point again. Come out upon another portion of the clearing, but unmistakably you can hear the river flowing in the distance. It's just a tease though, as the trail comes near the river, it's on the other side of some thick underbrush and not visible. The trail then turns and brings you out into the open prairie area, with only the occasional tree to, maybe, depending on the time of day, cast shade on the path. The trail is wide, which will allow navigation without potential brushing against the plants at the edges like you'd find at Carly State Park. It also means if you get quite hot out in these sections of the trails with less shade, I'd recommend you ensure you bring at least an extra bottle of water with you, as usually it would be pretty easy to get dehydrated in these types of hikes, and it's always nice to be prepared. After the open prairie, you're rewarded with a heavily shadowed area that eventually leads to the river. Ensure you use caution near the riverbanks, as sections of the trail have collapsed into it, and it's a decent fall into the river. And keep an extra close eye on those young hikers. Finally, you can hear the third part of the trail approach when there's a significant amount of commotion through the woods, which you pass by the swimming area at Flandrau before completing the final bit of the forest, before you end up back where you commenced. The swimming area seems to be quite a popular spot, as I could hear it for nearly half a mile away. My favorite part of the trail is on the latter half of the trail, when you head back into the woods and there is a decent canopy but the underbrush is really low. clearly an area that floods frequently to prevent the lower brush from growing too extensively. It provides some much-needed shade after the hot open prairie section, and it also has a bridge that lofts you over a water area. I say water flow because during the time we took the hike, there was a little more than a shallow stream, but the banks were very muddy, so I imagine in times of high water, this area channels much more water and would be quite impressive to see. Thank you for watching, and if you like this addition to the series, hit the like and subscribe buttons. Also, let us know which state park you'd like to see next.